But I also tell them, or I ask them rather, like, what do you want out of your life? Do you want millions of dollars? Do you want to be perceived as successful by society, or do you want to be fulfilled in your heart and really feel like you're a good father, a good mother, like I talked about before, good parent? Yeah, you might be tired when you wake up because you're whatever, life is what it is, but you still wake up ready to go because you're like, you know what? There's a point to living, right? And I think that point, identifying that point, feeling that point in your heart and soul can come through mindfulness.
Your stories, your service, your community. This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
All right, Alphas, welcome to the Tango Alpha Lima podcast. We're here to engage today's veterans through authentic stories, education, and entertainment, and build a virtual community that celebrates continued service and supports the American Legion's mission. We're glad that you're here to be a part of that community with us. Joe,
How
what
you
do you
doing
got for us?
today,
Great to
Adam?
see you. Great to
It's
see
good to
you.
see you too, buddy.
Good to see you as
Well,
always.
what you been up to?
Good and glad. Good and glad.
Good, good, good and glad. I love it. So, this weekend, delegates from each state will be gathering at Marymount University in Virginia for the 80th session of the American Legion Boys Nation. 98
Wow.
delegates arrived in D.C. in the summer of 1946 for the inaugural session of what was then called the Boys Forum of National Government. They toured the War and Navy departments, the FBI and the Naval Academy. They visited national shrines and placed a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington. They visited the bureau chiefs and cabinet members, participated in 8 radio broadcasts, and were interviewed by the press. And at the end of that week, they visited the White House where President Truman, a
Wow.
Legionnaire from Post 21 in Independence, Missouri, told them, I wish I knew his voice well enough to do a anyway,
Welfare.
the welfare of the United States in the next 20 or 30 years is going to be in your hands.
It's kind of
Truman
like
met with
Abraham Lincoln.
I know, man. I went too far back. The 40s feel like it was so long ago for me.
I kind of felt like Civil War era voice you just pulled out.
Dearest Annabelle. Truman met with the delegates again in ensuing years, setting a precedent for other presidents to follow, a precedent that would lead to a historic photo in 1963 of President JFK shaking hands with future President Bill Clinton. So I never knew much about the boys state or boys nation myself growing up. I was the first person in my family to go in the military that I knew of. And so I didn't know many of this stuff existed. I grew up not realizing that I could have an impact on the world at all, which is just crazy. I mean, I was raised well, just in sort of in a small town, I guess, What about you?
Well, I mean, similarly with respect to, my dad didn't serve. Grandfather did. He died in a car crash when my mom was 7, but he was a Korean War vet, Purple Heart recipient. But it just wasn't around. We just didn't really know much about it. I do work for retired Lieutenant General Martin R. Still, USMC, Marine Corps, and he met President Bill Clinton at Boys State in 1963. So they're both from Arkansas. He ended up being the second highest ranking Marine in the Marine Corps when he got out in
Yeah.
1999. So they
You work
had,
with him?
yeah, he's the general that I work with at the Veterans Mental Health Leadership Coalition. So
That's
he's the
really
president
cool.
of the coalition. He's 80. He turns 80 this September. So he was actually born in this year. But the point is that was instrumental in being able to help facilitate that relationship that would later go on to help govern and defend the free world together
Yeah.
between government and military. And then additionally, you're reading. I was just thinking about the Washington conference that the Legion had last year that I went and spoke at, and I took my daughter, who was, I think, maybe 13 at the time, and
Yeah.
just getting to go and visit, the National Mall, take in as much as we could, experience, the conference itself, and what that did to open up the possibilities for her. Because just like you were saying, Joe, like I didn't have that opportunity when I was younger. I'm sure I would have just soaked it up and just been like,
Yeah.
wow, this is how it gets done. This is the academic knowledge applied in reality. I could think that way. I could envision that way from a earlier place in life and what might the different, outcomes or products be. So it's really cool to hear about the long and storied history, the 80 years, um, how, the work that I'm doing now and the folks that are mentors for me and have done
Yeah.
some pretty incredible things with respect to leadership, how this was a central part of their story as well.
It's funny to me because I think the biggest impact outside of the people that I've met and the people I served with all my life has been travel, has been seeing things. If I had gotten a chance to go visit the Naval Academy, and I desperately want to go visit West Point after going and seeing the Naval Academy, because I just there's a
It's
culture there
incredible.
that no one can explain it to you. You've got to go there and see what these people are doing. I might have decided to go in as an officer instead. I might have actually had a reason to really focus and lock down in school the way that I probably could have. But for me personally, I had to go in and go through what I went through, and then when I got out, all of a sudden I'm a good student because I understand that history and knowledge matters. I didn't really get that when I went in, initially. I mean, you think you get it, but there's a difference between getting something and truly learning something. And I think it's clear that these Boys State and Boys Nation, you know, this is something that has impacted the entire country. It's known as a week that shapes a lifetime. So, as it comes back up here, and as we do it, every year, good luck to the delegates heading to the Capitol this weekend, as well as the young women heading to the Auxiliary Girls Nation at the same time. We're in a place now where we're making sure that everybody who serves gets acknowledged and is a part of the conversation. The more voices and minds that we have working on things, the better. So we'll have links to that, some information with that as well. Holly may
80
not know
years.
that, but we will because I said it.
80 years. Happy birthday, Boys State, Boys
We
Nation.
look good for 250 as a whole, really. I mean, if you think about it,
It's a young 250.
a young 250.
All right. Well, I'm excited for our guest today. It's Navy SEAL commander turned mindfulness and meditation teacher, Jon Macaskill. He's a Naval Academy graduate, not West Point, that's okay, who served for 24 years, including deployment in Iraq, Afghanistan, off the coast of Somalia, and Panama. Today, he runs Macaskill Consulting, LLC, bringing mindfulness and meditation to high performing teams to aid in dealing with stress, anxiety, and depression while increasing focus, creativity, and productivity. Those are all things that we could use in our lives.
Yeah.
Excited to unpack this with him a little bit.
And after we do that interview, which I'm super excited for, we need more Navy people on here. We'll of course have some scuttle booty. Today we actually have a story about a towing company who's allegedly auctioned off service members' vehicles, and one of Adam's famous myth versus fact mindfulness edition. So there you go.
That's right. And they're not all myths this time. I'm just preparing you, Joe. Okay.
Everything's a myth.
All right, Alphas, please stick around and we'll be back with Jon Macaskill right after the break.
Hey, it's nice, isn't it? The American Legion is giving away this Humvee in a national sweepstakes. I saw this Humvee clean 800 pounds. I saw it take our warfighters straight up a mountain. Last I heard, it scored 3 goals in the World Cup. You're gonna win this Humvee and you're gonna put it in your driveway and everybody's gonna know exactly what you're about, which is a strong America. So if you wanna win Clarence, that's what I call him, you can enter at leech.org/sweepstakes, and you can help fuel the mission.
Hello, Alphas. Today we're joined by Navy SEAL commander turned mindfulness and meditation teacher, Jon Macaskill.
Yeah, you got it.
Got it. John,
Nailed
welcome to
it.
the Tango Alpha Lima podcast, brother.
Hey, thanks, Joe, Adam. Happy to be here. And Holly, I know you're in the background, so thank you for bringing me in.
Of course.
Oh yeah, John, we're really excited to have you. I know we have some kind of mutual connections. I've actually kind of been following your more, public journey these last few years on the podcast and on LinkedIn. So really excited to have you on the show today and dig in a little bit. But when I was doing a little bit of the backstory on you, I learned that you were born in South Africa. And
I
so I
was.
thought, yeah, so a long way from the SEAL teams, right? So South Africa, raised in Ruston, Louisiana. So how did all that come about, and how did that lead to the eventually to the Naval Academy and the teams?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story in and of itself. So my parents, I always get asked, what were your parents doing in South Africa? Well, they were born and raised there as well. And we go back several generations. And in the early 80s, South Africa was still practicing apartheid, basically segregation. And they were also still practicing the draft. And my parents didn't agree with either one of them. So they had a friend who had come over to Louisiana Tech University as a professor, and my dad linked up with him, and my dad ended up getting a teaching visa for 1 year to come over and teach architecture at Louisiana Tech University. So we came over. So my mom, dad, three older sisters, my younger brother, and myself in 1984 with a plan on heading back in 1985. And we never went back, or at least never went back to stay. We've gone back to visit. Um, but yeah, so the kind of funny piece is that they left South Africa, yes, to get away from the segregation, but also to get away from that draft. And then I ended up going through schooling in Ruston, Louisiana, and then voluntarily enlisted in the Navy. And I started as an enlisted sailor, as a parachute rigger, and then got picked up to go to the Naval Academy.
PR.
I
like
was.
it.
I was a PR, an air crew
Wow.
survival
PR
equipment
Brown
man.
was one of my basic
Yeah.
PR2 Brown.
Oh, right on, man. Yeah. I keep forgetting that you're Navy, man. Well, right on. So enlisted sailor, enlisted in '96. I at the time wanted to go to the Naval Academy and be a SEAL, but I had applied straight out of high school, got denied to go to the academy. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to enlist and go that route. And went through the parachute rigger school and started working on ejection seats, and then got picked up from the enlisted ranks, and went to the Naval Academy, graduated in the class of 2001. And we were the last peacetime class for years, for decades.
Wow.
But yeah, I decided probably sophomore year in high school that I wanted to go into special operations or the Marine Corps, and the Naval Academy was a route to do either one of those. Sorry, Adam, no offense, but the Army wasn't on the list.
It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
My cousins
That
were
was
in
over 30.
my cousins were in the SEAL teams.
Oh yeah.
What? Yeah. What? Sophomore year of high school. What was the thought process that led you to say because we didn't have the global war on terror hadn't started yet.
Yeah.
It was mostly the Schwarzenegger and Rambo movies of the 80s, that we kind of had that were the guiding light of the action
Yeah.
adventure, or Chuck Norris maybe. What was it for you?
Yeah. Funny enough, it was a movie, but it was The Rock, with Sean Connery and Nick. What is it?
Nicolas Cage. Great movie.
Yeah, Nicolas Cage. Yeah. So, all the SEALs sneaking into the bottom of the prison there. And I was like, oh man, this is cool. And they're getting to jump out of the back of a helicopter and then dive. And I was like, okay, what job is this? And then of course, from there, I went and watched the Navy SEAL movie. So I kind of did it in backwards. And I wish I could say that there was something more driving my decision, but it was Hollywood, man.
It was the call to adventure.
That's right.
sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Nothing wrong with that. I mean, how many people went into the military because they read Lord of the Rings? I mean, wanted to be a part of something, even to be part of a team as a whole. I mean,
right.
But 24 years of service. So like Iraq, Afghanistan, off the coast of Somalia, Panama. So without getting into anything that you're not supposed to talk to or do, What was everybody has a moment that's, like the crossroads moment, the moment where you decide what kind of person you're going to be. Because as somebody who's been injured, I could justify being an angry, salty guy, and that's
Lieutenant
just not
Dan.
who I am.
Yeah.
And well, you can tap into it when needed, but you don't
Yeah.
need that to be your default.
Sure.
That I guess that's the whole concept of mindfulness is being able to control your default.
Yeah.
So, what
Yeah.
was it for you, that moment when you realized that, like, I really need to find a way to learn this or teach this? Give me a little bit of that, if you will.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I won't go too far into detail as far as operations, but you guys are familiar with Operation Red Wings, with the lone survivor operation with Marcus Luttrell and Danny Dietz and those cats. Well, I was there in Afghanistan when all that happened, and I was involved in that operation, but I wasn't on it. I was in the Joint Operations Center. But those were my boys. Those were my guys, right? And being in the operations center was the last place I wanted to be when all that was going down. And for those listeners or viewers who are not familiar with that operation, we ended up losing 19 American service members on that op. And that caused me a lot of survivor's guilt and moral injury because I wasn't out there. Like, I went out on the battlefield and did what special operators do. And that didn't affect me as much. I won't say that it didn't affect me. It didn't affect me as much as sitting in that operations center when my guys were out there on the battlefield. And I came back and I struggled with that. And I honestly still struggle with it at times. But I self-medicated with alcohol and prescription medication that I abused. And I got to a point that was really ugly, and I sought out some counseling. And very long story short, because I know we're limited on time, this guy recommended mindfulness and meditation to me, and I laughed at him. I thought, I was like, "What? No, man, I'm this badass special operator. Why are you telling me to do this woo-woo stuff?" And then he sold it to me as a performance enhancement. He's like, "Okay, well, what if I had a pill that I could give you that you could take that would improve your performance?" I was like, "Yeah, doc, give me that pill." It wasn't a pill. It was mindfulness and meditation. So I ended up doing it originally for performance enhancement. Like so many high performing, quote unquote, individuals get into mindfulness and meditation, but then they find the other sides of it. I don't want to say I found enlightenment, but I found levels of peace that I hadn't had in years or decades even. And so I felt that it was a calling to find a way to teach this stuff. And that's why I do what I do now. And then over and above that, we were talking before we hit record about being a dad, right? I have to be mindful to be a good dad. I have to be present with my kids, not on this thing, the cell phone all the time, right? Or if they start pitching a fit, and I'm certainly not perfect at this at all, but like my 4-year-old, well, now 5-year-old, if she's pitching a fit about not brushing her teeth in the morning or not putting her shoes on, that's normal for a 4 or 5-year-old. I'm a 48-year-old man. Who does the emotional regulation fall on? It should be me, not her. And yeah, again, I get that wrong quite often, but that mindfulness and meditation has helped me to notice when I get it wrong and reel it back in, or pause before I get it wrong. And that has also driven like, I want to bring this to men. I want to bring it to fathers and brothers and husbands, so that they can be better versions of all of those. So that we can be better friends, right? I mean, you're a better friend when you're present and in the moment with your buddies. So it's a calling, man. It's a calling.
Self-correction. You
John,
were talking about performance enhancing. I just, sorry, I just want to follow up on that. You mentioned it, performance enhancing,
Yeah.
and when before you came on, we were touching upon the idea, and I called it a very important tool in a warrior's mindset. And I love that you thought of it that way, that he knew how to approach you in a way that worked for you, but also in retrospect, you had at some point in your career stopped being teachable.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%.
And so I just wanted to point that out because I feel like it's a fair judgment on my part to see that, because I've been there.
Yeah.
And overcoming that, it changes you.
Right.
Changes you.
And you know what's funny, Joe, is I have a not to pitch my book, but it's right in line with what you just said. And yes, I am a Navy SEAL and I have the book. So haha, let's get that out of the way.
Pitch the book, Jon.
So the book is sitting on my back shelf back here. It's short. It's like 120 pages. It's called Dial in Your Leadership, DIAL, for discipline, integrity, authenticity. And here's where it ties in, Joe. Learning always. L is for learning always. And there are times as leaders, we think that we know it all when we don't. And we need to be open to asking questions and realizing that the answers are not always inside us, but they might be amongst our people, and leaning on them. But yeah, I had gotten to a point where I thought, hey, what are you telling me? Mindfulness and meditation, whatever. I don't need that. And, boy, did I ever.
Jon, when did that get introduced to you in your career? Like, what was the
got
time frame?
introduced 2015.
Okay, and then Red Wings
10
was like
years later.
2005, right?
Yeah, 10 years after Red Wings.
And that was still pretty early in your career. That was like 4 years. You said you commissioned in 2001, so you were like 4 years in at that point.
Correct.
So from year 4 to year, what is that? Year 14, 10 years later. And then you're going from small teams, right? And the SEAL teams, all the way, whether it was 2015 or later on, you're commanding up to formations of 2,500.
Right.
I guess maybe from the mindfulness, perspective, how did that start working its way into your leadership style, and how did it help you with what you were navigating at that time? How might it have been kind of more beneficial for those, previous 10 years had you had that capacity?
I wish I'd had it introduced me in high school, both for the performance enhancing side, right? I ran track and cross country, and I would get super nervous before a big race. And I'm quite sure that those nerves ended up negatively affecting my competitive side, or not negatively affecting my competitive side, but negatively affecting my performance. But yeah, same thing. I wish I'd had it introduced me in the SEAL teams earlier, because I think I could have been a better operator on the battlefield, but also a better leader, more empathetic, more in touch, more present, asking better questions, noticing when my people were struggling without them voicing it. I didn't have to wait until they voiced it. But yeah, as far as how it showed up, and I remember this vividly. So the guy that introduced it to me, he was a Navy psychologist, and I had been going to him for my mental health checks regularly, but I kind of hid it. I was like, hey guys, I told my guys, I've got a meeting, I've got this appointment, whatever. And then I started putting on, I had this giant calendar. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jesse Itzler and the big ass calendar, but I had one similar to that. It wasn't, back then it wasn't the big ass calendar, but it was a big 1 year calendar. And every month I had a red mark blocked off for a day that I was doing some mental health work. And I had guys come up to me, they're like, hey boss, hey, is everything okay? I'm like, yeah, why? They're like, well, I see on your calendar you've got a lot of mental health days. I'm like, well, I'm not taking off those days, but I'm going to go visit with my psychologist. I'm going to go have some therapy. I'm going to talk through some things, and I'm learning some tools that are helping me. And so I was more open about it. And then some of them started being open to going and seeking mental health support, which I think amongst men, it's becoming better. But 10 years ago, there was this kind of perception, stigma that, oh man, if you're going to see a therapist, you're messed up, you're broken. Right. And it's not that at all. It's just like, you don't go to the gym to fix yourself. You go to the gym to maintain yourself. Well, going to mental health appointments, it can be there to both maintain your mental health, mental fitness, and get a little tune-up if you need it. And there was definitely times I needed it. There still are times that I need it, and I go to therapy regularly still today. So I think that's how it changed the kind of the communication between me and my people, but then it also made me more present with my teams.
You know, I I love that because what you were doing in that conversation was a lot more than just being open with your own stuff. You were showing vulnerability as an investment of trust.
Absolutely.
You and I think that a lot of people think that somebody who's vulnerable is emotional or isn't in control. Um, for me, sort of a side story, I got involved in America's Vet Dogs. I got my first dog in 2008.
What kind of
I
dog
got
do
a
you got?
dog because I wanted a truck dog. I didn't
Yeah.
realize what I was really getting myself into. I didn't realize I was getting a sneaky furry therapist. I didn't realize I didn't know any of that stuff. And 11 days before I got hurt September 17th, 2004. On September 6th, Labor Day of 2004, we lost most of my second squad to a suicide bomber.
Oh
As a
man,
corpsman, nightmare scenario. It's the last thing you ever want to go through, especially with it being your guys.
sure.
And I was, it's weird when everyone's 18, 19 years old and you're 21, 22, you're unk, you're your uncle. And so I had a job to do both as a corpsman and as an older guy who was a bit of a morale leader, if I say so myself. And I went around the back of the building. When we laid all their gear out, it looked like a serial gear inspection. And that's what got me. Like, I was fine. I was even like loading them up. I was okay. Like, I was
Yeah.
holding it together. But the normalcy of loading out the gear, that's what got me. I went around the building, had me a good 2-minute cry, good hours of dealing with that, obviously, in my 2 minutes, and
Yeah.
thought that I had legitimately, for the most part, dealt with it. Then I was
Mm.
dealing with all my own stuff. So we circle all the way around to me getting this dog 2008. And then in 2016, when that dog passed away, John, I couldn't control myself. I don't know what was going on. I have always been in great control of my emotions. I've never been an outburst guy. I've never been a big crier. I could not stop crying. A, a rap song would come on and make me cry. I'd see a Ford commercial. It didn't matter. Just things were triggering me left and right. I could not figure out what was going on. I eventually realized that as men, sometimes we need an excuse to let things go. For me, losing my dog,
Mm-hmm.
his last service to me was giving me a chance to truly grieve for the first time since Iraq. And I couldn't control myself for 2.5 weeks. And on the backside of that, I'm more likely to cry in front of 500 men giving a speech than ever before. And I've never been more in control of my emotions. I don't know what that was, but I needed that. That
Yeah.
vulnerability for me was an investment in getting to know myself in ways that I didn't know was possible. But we're not here to talk about me. I actually want to tie that in to my question with you, which is, for me, that was my first planted seed of needing mindfulness.
Mm.
But for you, for anybody who hears mindfulness and immediately sort of tunes out or does where you were and where I was prior to my dog passing away. It seems like we were within the same year there of both coming to the same conclusion. You just had somebody tell you, and I had to go through, a dog, and which is easily the best way to learn is have somebody tell you something. You go, oh, got it. Thanks. But it's not always that easy. So for you, I'd love to hear you to make a case of your own for mindfulness, because for me, it took me learning the hard way that I needed to grieve, and I needed to use the full range of my emotions in order to truly be a complete person.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear your case for mindfulness in a way that I think would maybe work on somebody like where we were prior to our own sort of wake up call.
Yeah. Well, first off, Joe, that's beautiful, man. I'm really glad that you had your pup. What kind of dog do you have?
A golden, and I'm on
Oh
my
yeah.
third service
Yeah.
dog now, and I
Man.
got another golden, and this one's a mess.
Yeah.
I love this guy. He's so lovey.
Yeah, I've got two pups right outside the door here, a Belgian Malinois Shepherd mix, and then a Mountain Cur, and they're like my best friends. Um, but that's beautiful, man. That pup allowed you to get to where you were when he passed away, And that sounds like I had somebody when I've cried in multiple therapy sessions or on a retreat that I was on, and somebody used the term, those were tears that have been waiting to be cried. And I was like, that's exactly right. That's exactly how it feels. It feels like there was this dam that was just storing up all this water, all these tears behind it, and the dam was broken and just floodgates open. So, and when you did get that, I'm sure it felt good in a way, right? It felt
It
beautiful,
was
right?
wonderful. It
Yeah.
felt complete. I really
Yeah.
felt like a complete person for the
Yeah,
first time in a long
exactly.
time.
So, really glad that you've had that, and I love that you're involved with that organization. Um, so anyway, as far as for me, the way that I teach mindfulness now is there's a lot of people who do grasp onto it for performance enhancement, and sometimes that's what will open the door. But I also tell them, or I ask them rather, like, what do you want out of your life? What, do you want millions of dollars? Do you want to be perceived as successful by society, or do you want to be fulfilled in your heart and really, feel like you're a good father, a good mother, good, like I talked about before, good parent, um, and every day kind of wake up. Yeah, you might be tired when you wake up because you're whatever, life is what it is, but you still wake up ready to go because you're like, you know what? There's a point to living, right? And I think that point, identifying that point, feeling that point in your heart and soul can come through mindfulness. Now, when I say mindfulness, it's not like necessarily like this operator on the painting that's behind me meditating, right? I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's mindfulness can be meditation, but it's also, I mean, right now I'm being mindful with you guys, you being mindful with me. We're having a conversation, right? We don't have 27 tabs open on our screen, and we're staring at all those things. We're in the moment. That's mindfulness. I walked my dogs this morning, and normally I take my phone on me. I left my phone, and it was awesome. It was awesome. I like to say that it was accidental, but I think there was something more at work there. Like I wanted to be present with my dogs when I was walking them, and they could tell that I was more present, right? It wasn't they weren't all over the place. They were right there with me, and I was right there with them. Um, Mindfulness is a way of life, a way that I kind of envision it, and I'm a math nerd, so I envision Venn diagrams all the time. Is there's one circle that is overall wellness and happiness, if you will. And inside that circle is a smaller circle that is mindfulness. It's a piece of the pie, right? And then inside that circle, even smaller, is meditation. Meditation can be mindfulness, but meditation can also be, a body scan. It could be a mantra. There's all sorts of different types of meditation, but it's a piece of mindfulness, and then mindfulness is a piece of fulfillment and happiness and overall wellness. And I think that's when I sell it to people like that, I can see the light bulb click or to come on, right? The and I can see that there's a desire there for people to get to that point in their lives. And I say get to that point. It's not get to that point. It's get on that journey, right? Because it's not like you start practicing mindfulness and then suddenly everything is hunky dory in your life. I mean, hell, like the reason I brought up brushing teeth and putting shoes on this morning is that literally happened this very morning with my little girl, and I had to be mindful to be in, I don't want to say control of my emotions, but to regulate my emotions. So yeah, it's a game changer, man. If you can find a way to implement some type of mindfulness in your life, and for some people that looks like going and surfing or skiing or playing the piano or there's hundreds of thousands of different ways to get into that state of mindfulness and being present, that state of flow and fulfillment. But it doesn't have to look like meditation. But
Yeah, I
meditation
was about
can
to
help.
say,
Yeah.
for some people it's music. For
Yeah.
some people it's writing and reading. And for me, reading was how I got through a lot of my pain in the hospital. So yeah, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Mindfulness can look like a lot of things.
Yeah.
I want
Yeah.
to
Exactly.
I want to shift just a little bit, maybe more to like the external expression of mindfulness, because so much has changed, in the last 10 years, like you said, especially around the culture of being able to, be more bold and, taking mental health time, saying that you're not okay, seeking some of these things out. You specifically, John, in partnership with Will and your consulting and your book and the thought leadership, you put out on LinkedIn, such an expression to be able to be the example of that, to be able to have some prompts and some thoughts, to help promote people, through this process. Additionally, you guys have the podcast as well, and even like just kind of more focused into the last 5 years. It's been growing year over year, and some incredible folks, coming on there to be able to lend their expertise, dive into, some of the tools, techniques and practices. So tell us a little bit about the show, the podcast, how that's going, and how that kind of developed into like your current expression and offering that you're helping others along this mindfulness journey, that you are an agent of change in this big culture shift that we're seeing.
Yeah. Well, thanks for this opportunity, Adam. So I told you I started practicing mindfulness and meditation 2015. Around 2018, I started teaching it. And 2019, I was talking to a West Point grad buddy of mine, and he had just gotten back from a retreat. And he's like, "Oh man, I know you're getting big into mindfulness and meditation. You should meet this guy, Will Schneider." And Will lives in New York City at the time. I was living in Virginia Beach. And I jumped on a call, just like many of us do when we do a networking call. Hey, who are you? Kind of sniffing one another's butts, right? Figuring out who's who does what. And and then at the end of the call, Will's like, "Hey man, so when are we going to talk next?" Which kind of caught me off guard, because a lot of the time when you're doing these networking calls, you say goodbye and you never really talk to the person again. And he was like, "No, he was very insistent on getting the next call on the calendar the next month. And we did that for like 3 or 4 months. And then COVID hit, and I was following Will on Instagram, and Will's a yoga instructor. And so his in-person yoga practice or teaching disappeared overnight. And so he quickly pivoted. He was real quick to pivot to doing virtual stuff on Instagram and other places. He was doing the Instagram lives. And he was having, reasonable success with that. And I said, "Hey, Will, these calls that we do once a month, what if we did them on Instagram Live? We basically just talk to one another, and like we are right now, but on Instagram Live." And he was all in. And that was the beginning of Men Talking Mindfulness, the podcast that we have now. But it was literally two guys just holding our phones up, having a conversation, and we had like, I don't know, 3 people following us. And then we figured out how to rip that audio off of those and put it into a podcast form. And it was awful, man. Like iPhone audio. My dogs came in and made several cameos. I did some from the road in my RV. I literally did some sitting outside a Starbucks because I didn't have good cell phone reception. So I used the Wi-Fi from the Starbucks in my car, which at the time was this little yellow Fiat 500, because we had an RV and we had a tow behind. And yeah,
Nice.
and my phone would die because of the heat. So anyway, it was a disaster. So if you ever go back and listen to some of the first episodes, you're like, "Good Lord, these guys have come a long way." But that was 6+ years ago, and we've been going almost weekly since. And yeah, we've had some fantastic guests on, but it was called Men Talking Mindfulness because it was quite literally 2 men talking about mindfulness. And then we started to get into the analytics, and the large preponderance of our listeners were men. And then we thought, you know what, we're gonna take a slight pivot here. We're not going to make this exclusively for men, but a lot of what we talk about is for men. And I mean, hell, we've had women come on to talk about women's hormones. And I think men need to know that. Men need to know when women are going through different things in their hormone cycles.
They want
And
to stay married at least.
yes, exactly. So it's something that we started, and about a year into it, I was like, "Hey, Will, man, I don't know if this is going anywhere." And Will was again persistent. He's like, "No, man, just keep pushing. Let's stay with it just a little bit longer." And then we've done really well. We're in the top 1.5% of podcasts globally. We're I think number 3 as far as mindfulness podcasts in the world, according to iHeartRadio. So we're pretty happy with it, and we're doing a lot more. We've actually got a course coming out called Awareness to Action. And that starts next week on May 27th. Yeah, so we're doing more than the podcast. The podcast started as the platform, and now we're building on that, doing retreats, doing courses, doing workshops and stuff like that. So we're having a lot of fun. But yeah, coming back to your original question here, Adam, that's how we're doing it kind of externally, is sharing these practices. And it's not just our practices. We bring in guests that are much more experts than we are. So we're having a lot of fun.
I just want to say that I love, this is definitely one of those talks I feel like we just sit here for like 2 or 3 hours and just do one of those like old school back in the day, podcasts that we were like 3 hours. But I want to say that for me personally, one of the biggest things that I noticed once I started really paying attention to that stuff is that my hypervigilance felt more purposeful. Yeah, I didn't lose my edge the way I thought I did. I always tell people that the problem with PTSD is that it takes something which should be good and makes a mess out of it. And what I mean by that is PTSD or whatever you want to call it is a defense mechanism. It reminds us to check our windows, check our doors, don't drive, by weird things on the side of the road, even when we're back home and we know it's fine. But for me, I was able to triage threats in a more reasonable way. My head never got away from me once I started paying attention to my emotions, because once you understand where your body is at and where your mind is at, you know how they're interacting in ways that you could never have picked up on before.
Right.
So for a veteran specifically, and maybe, your own point of view, what does, mindfulness do for things like hypervigilance and sleep issues or, I hate to use the word anger because I don't want people to think that veterans are just angry. We're really just frustrated in a lot of ways. We see, the bureaucracy and red tape that's in the way of common sense in ways that other people don't see. I want to focus really on the impact here and a use case for veterans in this situation.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that I still practice some level of hypervigilance, and even more so as a father now. My poor kids, bless their hearts, they're going to struggle with that their whole lives. But yeah, I think mindfulness allows you to reframe that. Like a lot of us see, if you have post-traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic stress injury, post-traumatic growth, whatever you want to call it, like you said, yeah, you are going to be hypervigilant. Your nervous system is changed. The way that you see things does change. And it's not all necessarily for the worse. Like I don't mind being a little bit hypervigilant, right? If you really boil it down to it, hypervigilance is a high level of situational awareness. Mindfulness is a high level of situational awareness. Now, where mindfulness kind of takes an extra step is that you go on the inside as well, right? So I'm mindful of where my exits are. I'm mindful of who's coming through the entrances in the restaurants. Like so many of us are. I'm mindful if there is a sudden stop in traffic, like, okay, what caused that, right? And I see you shaking your head there, Joe. But also, I turn inside, like, okay, what's happening inside? Why am I that way? And I don't judge myself for it. I'm like, okay, well, I'm that way because I've seen this stuff. I've experienced stuff that the other people here, and no judgment, not saying I'm better or worse, but I have seen stuff that the people in this restaurant or this coffee shop haven't seen. A lot of them haven't seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want them to see it. I mean, I volunteered to go and serve so that they didn't necessarily have to see this stuff. And that has made me more vigilant. So I'm turning inside. I'm like, okay, of course I'm this way. Of course I'm this way. And then not judging myself for it. And then also like, okay, well, if I hadn't seen that stuff, would I be this way? I don't know. Do I want to be this way? Maybe I do. Again, as a father, I there's a level of hypervigilance, tactical awareness, situational awareness, whatever you want to call it, that I want, right? Um, that I may not have had otherwise. So I think, and I certainly don't want to marginalize post-traumatic stress in any shape, form, or fashion, any type of trauma, whether it's military, sexual, parents abusing. I don't want to minimize or marginalize any of that, but there is a level of heightened awareness on the internal and external that happens when you are exposed to that. And some of it's going to be good, some of it's going to be bad. We can't throw it all out. It's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right?
John, I'd be interested a little bit, just kind of talking about, excited about the organic origins and growth through honest conversation into now kind of this system and program and the retreats that you guys are moving into. Who is kind of like who from the audience has shown up? What's kind of that
Mm,
persona that's starting to consume more of the material? And then who's kind of the profile that's going to the retreats and some of the benefits they're getting out? Because I'd kind of like to frame it in a way for our listeners too, for our alphas, if they're interested in participating and learning more
yeah.
about some of your offerings.
Oh man, we would love them too. So funny enough, funny you should ask that question. So Will and I, we're just two dudes and we haven't really thought about the business side of things. And we started our first retreat or did our first retreat coming up on 4 years ago. In September, it'll be 4 years. And one of the attendees was a classmate of mine from the Naval Academy. This guy's brilliant. I won't mention names because I don't know how comfortable he is with his name being mentioned, but brilliant guy. And he has since become one of our business advisors. And he said, who, this is like 3 months ago. He's like, who are your guys' ideal customers? What's the persona, the ideal customer profile? And I was like, I don't even know what you mean. What, what does that mean? And he's like, well, why don't you do this? Take a look at your top 50 episodes. Take the transcripts from those top 50 episodes, feed them into AI, and see what was similar across them. And then ask it to spit out what your top 3 personas are, the ICPs. And it did that. And it spit out the learning and development leader, somebody, who's out there running an organization and wants to bring people in to develop their culture, develop their psychological safety, develop all the corporate buzzwords. Then the other one was the man who seems to have it all, but is burning the candle at both ends. It was really fascinating. Now, we didn't end up changing our podcast dramatically so that we're catering only to those because we know that there are other listeners. But it seems that in putting this the retreats together and putting this course together, it seems as though those are our buyers as well. It's pretty interesting to have
Wow.
had all that data and not even like paying attention to it. So it's been wild, man. The era of AI that we are just now starting. That's another whole 3-hour conversation,
I
Joe.
know you're giving super producer Holly some great ideas here to go back into all our
Yeah.
old shows.
Oh my gosh, it was a gold mine of data. Gold mine.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, John, like Joe said, we could sit here and talk to you
Yep.
for hours. It's been such a great conversation and just going along the journey a little bit with you, hearing about your experiences, how it found you in the service, providing benefit, how you started making an impact for your sailors and for the formations. and then to see it blossom and feel like, the cool thing, we got so much life, left to live, post service, and kind of getting our
Right.
our second wind, and feel like we're just getting started in so many regards. So it's just been great to be here with you today. Before you sign off, is there anything that we didn't talk about that we should discuss with our alphas before we let you go?
No, guys, you've done a fantastic job running through the conversation, sitting very organic. I really enjoyed it. And yes, I could sit here for hours with you too as well. So thanks for the opportunity. I will put out a shameless plug. Probably the easiest way to find out more about me and my work with Will and the Men Talking Mindfulness podcast is if you just text the letters MTM, so that's for Men Talking Mindfulness, MTM, to 33777, and that's everything that we've got. It'll take you to a website that's got all the things.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's handy.
Yeah, honestly, this is one of my favorite interviews we've done in a while, and I enjoy all of them. So that's definitely saying something. I feel like
Thanks,
there's
John.
so many things that we can unpack that, and these are conversations like you said. I think it's getting better between men as a whole. I think we're getting more open. I think
For
there's
sure.
more positivity and less insecurity. I think that there's a lot of really good things happening, and I think it starts with us as leaders, whether we want to admit it or not. People look to us in a lot of ways for the beat of how the country is going, how how to deal with life and stress. And I think that we owe it to our country to continue serving by continuing to improve ourselves in ways like this. So these are conversations that we couldn't have had in our 30s. And I'm happy to be in a situation to where I guess there's a reason why we can't have our minds and our hearts and our bodies all at the same time. The whole world would just be a mess. But here we are, and it means the world having you spend your valuable time with us. We again, thank you so much for visiting us today. And alphas, please stick around for some scuttlebutt after the break.
Scuttlebutt, I love it.
We love scuttle booty.
Discover the power of your voice and form a deeper understanding of our nation and the principles that shape it. As a participant in the American Legion Oratorical Contest, you'll develop a deeper knowledge of the U.S. Constitution and a greater understanding of the duties, responsibilities, rights, and privileges of American citizenship. As you step up to this academic speaking challenge, you'll learn leadership skills, the art of oration, and have a shot at winning up to $25,000 in scholarships. Seize your moment. Visit legion.org/oratorical and take the first steps towards shaping your future today.
Okay, alphas, we hope you had a great break. We know Joe sure did. Now it's time for some scuttlebutt. Joe, what you got for us?
I got a little scuttlebutt, man. You just said it.
You got a big scuttlebutt. I
got a big one. So this one isn't just a wild
That's okay.
story. It's got I'm hoping it's got a little justice in it too. So it's a recent piece by Karen Jowers over at Military Times, and it involves the Department of Justice dropping the hammer on Predatory towing company, which is target locking troops.
I'm just seeing like those law commercials, like the Texas Hammer, the tough, smart lawyer.
No,
What did they do? What did they do? How did they drop the hammer? Give it to me.
So the feds are officially suing S&K Towing Incorporated, a company based out of San Clemente, California. So this company had a memorandum of agreement with the Marine Corps base in Camp Pendleton to handle towing services for the base police department. Why would anyone ever mess up a government contract? They famously overpay, but these guys, whatever. So instead of doing their jobs honestly, the Department of Justice alleges that between 2020 and 2025, this outfit illegally auctioned off or disposed of as many as 148 vehicles owned by service members without even getting a required court order. They just towed vehicles and sold them. So they violated the Service Member Civil Relief Act, or SCRA, which explicitly protects deployed or active duty troops from having their property sold off while they're away serving the country. And get this, some of the vehicles were registered right to the barracks on base. So in multiple cases, the company went ahead and auctioned the cars even after being explicitly told the owners were active duty military. So we're talking about vehicles that literally had military equipment, like uniforms and service awards and stinky shoes and dirty socks and just military stuff in the back seat or in the trunk when they sold them off. I mean, what was your car like when you were driving around? It was slap full of your stuff, right? Because you never knew when you might need something. You didn't want to have to like drive home. You always just had like a change of uniform or something in your vehicle.
Yeah.
Or maybe you were just so put together, Apache pilot out of Marr, you had a
Well,
spare.
we had our big flight lockers and stuff, so we did. But
Mm,
no, I mean, if you were maybe like infantry or something like that
if you
in
were
the trunk,
poor
I could
like
definitely.
us.
I drove a truck, so I didn't like keep so
Ah,
much in there. Maybe I'm not like a good use case for this. But here's what sticks out to me about this. Like if you do dirty dealings, if you do shady business, like you're it's not going to end well for you. Like this is, what is done in the dark like will come to the light. So, the fact that they were being taken advantage of, in a lot of ways for so long, 148 cars like going through this process. I mean, it's just like,
yeah,
look, we found a way to scheme to deceive and to get some extra money going. We're gonna lie about it. We're gonna keep going. Like
yeah.
that stuff's gonna come to light, and it's not gonna end well.
What's funny about this is they did it even while the Department of Justice got involved. So they were already like being poked. And instead of like locking down and going legit for a year or two to get the DOJ off their back, they in May of 2024, a military legal assistance attorney from Camp Pendleton called up SK Towing and laid the whole thing out and told them directly, "You're violating federal law by selling these troops cars." And according to the federal lawsuit, the manager of the towing company casually responded with, "We do this all the time." It's the way it's always been done, Apache pilot Adam Marr.
That's right.
It's just that's what we do. Oh, our bad. Sorry, continue.
Well,
So
I
they
mean,
didn't
I don't
even
know
stop.
what do you say to? Oh, well, I'm so sorry. We'll admit guilt right now, and we'll change our ways. I mean,
That's
hey, no,
true.
no, no. Well, I don't know what you're talking about. We've always done it this way. That sounds like a logical response in the face of,
It's both
allegations.
a stalling tactic and an admission of guilt. So,
That's right.
so
That's right.
after the warning, they kept right on auctioning vehicles without court orders. And so now Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon and the DOJ are asking a federal court for major monetary damages and restitution for the affected service members, plus penal penalties.
That's where the
Um,
hammer comes in.
the hammer comes in there, but like in my mind, if you're selling off 148 cars, and military members, they wouldn't be selling these cars if they were like $2,000 jalopies. They're selling like new Camaros and Mustangs because that's what people do.
What do
When
you think the average price they were selling them for was?
I bet they were getting 20,000 minimum per car. I bet they were averaging out 20 because
2.9 million. 2.9 million if they got it 20,000 for each car.
do you feel like that's a fair number if we're looking at they were probably quick
Uh,
selling.
well, if it was E4 below that's been deployed, the car was probably worth about 70,000.
Yeah, you're probably right. So I'm saying on average, I'm betting they're getting, even if it's half that, you're still looking at $1 million. Like it's wild to me. And in my mind, it also matters what they did with that money. That's what I'm curious. Like, what do you do with $2.9 million as a towing company?
Yeah, well, first of all, the people that are like normally caught embezzling or some kind of scheme where they're, paying themselves and it's off the books or whatever, they're
This is
just
only a
using it.
5-year period, too. That's 3 mil in
They're using it
5 years.
for their own lavish lifestyle or like just consumption. They're just use it for their material welfare. That's what these guys use it for. They weren't putting it into a nonprofit.
I will say though, I mean, I'm doing a little plug here for the American Legion. It's a reminder why the Legion fights so hard to protect the SCRA. Our troops shouldn't have to worry about their cars being sold to the highest bidder by a shady tow yard who's willing to compromise a government contract for a measly 2 point whatever million while they're deployed overseas or in the field training. So if you're a service member out at Pendleton or anywhere else and a tow company gives you the runaround, don't just take it. Go straight to your base legal assistance office and let loose on them. Let loose.
Drop the hammer.
Drop the hammer. What you got, Mr. Adam?
Well, I just got two quick myth or facts for you in honor of our guest today, Jon Macaskill. Got a mindfulness edition. So here you go for myth or fact number one. Meditation is too soft for military operations.
Can we actually do a quick definition on mindfulness for people who may not know what we're talking about here?
Sure. How would you define it?
So I think that if you've ever studied, I might be adding more things that we need to define, stoicism or anything like that. A lot of it comes down to making sure that your reactions, you choose, you're not at the whim of your emotions, that you can separate your logical thinking from your emotions, and then also be able to sit down and sit inside of those emotions and not have it be something that can be harmful. I mean, I know that there's a simpler way to explain that, but for me, the biggest thing that I've gotten out of mindfulness is a lower resting heart rate and the ability to react logically to stressful situations in ways that I think makes a big difference. And I don't mean stressful situations like people pulling guns on you in a convenience store in Buckington, New Jersey in, August of 2024. I mean, like, specifically when life gets hard, you learn how to deal with those things in ways where you don't hard focus on the problem. You can break things down and focus on solutions. Because I need that kind of stuff. I'm not great. I'm like most military guys when they get out and gals, we just sort of shove it down and put a little dirt on it. So you-
It's a really, really great description. Some of the things I think about is like, what is the difference between the way a human being physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually feels and operates if you were to be a human being on a SEAL team that was about to depart your aircraft and go and run an operation to get a high value target and the bullets start flying? What might you as a human being, how would your system be operating? Now, the complete opposite of that is, let's say that you've left your job, you've retired, and now you're down at the beach, with your significant other, and you're having a leisurely day with a leisurely drink. What is your operating system
yeah,
like? What is that experience like? Now, those are probably like the two extreme, kind of situations that
yeah,
you could have. Somewhere in the middle is like everyday life. So we have the stressors, we have all the things that our minds and our environment is essentially, creating our reality around us. And so mindfulness is the ability for you to almost be able to like go to the beach, for example, in the middle of your stressful environment. And so there's all sorts of tactics and techniques and tools and practices that exist out there. They can also be used to strengthen, to reduce stress hormones, to break the fight or flight responses in your nervous system. That's all programmed in there. And so these tools and these practices are indeed for every single human being on planet Earth, whether you're in the military or not in the military. So Navy SEALs, for example, so this is of course a myth. Meditation is not too soft for special operations, for conventional forces, or for regular people. Navy SEALs are taught box breathing in buds as a standard, and that's really a 4-second count in. Hold your breath for 4 seconds. A 4-second exhale. Hold your breath for 4 seconds. So it's like you're breathing in a box. if we were even to do that just right here, right now, and you had an Aura ring and you had an EKG on and you had some different electronics, measure up to if you took labs and you took blood beforehand to be able to see what your biomarkers are at and did this for 15, 30 minutes over an extended period of time and you came back and you took measurements on the other side, what you would find is a significantly healthier, more balanced and in tune person. And when you're in that state, then you're able to better handle the stressors of life, no matter if it's everyday work stresses, family life stresses, or maybe their operational stresses
Yeah.
in the military, and that's why they teach these. Marines piloted a mindfulness based mind fitness training over a decade ago. Army Special Forces, Air Force Pararescue, all integrating breathwork into resilience training. That's the incredible thing about breathwork is it's free and it's accessible and you don't have to take anything, and every single person on the planet can do it.
Yeah.
Um, our
Speaking
guests
of
are
free, I want to jump in and say that America's Fun and the Semper Fi Fund offer mindfulness classes as well. That is where I originally learned about the concept, and I've been obsessed with it ever since then. I need to spend more time meditating and doing that because I agree with you 100%. I love that anybody who dedicates their life to teaching other people how to reach that state of I guess improved brain function and emotional regulation.
so then there's the inverse side of this, and the military always has a fun way of exploring all potentials of things, both for good and for warfare. So here's number two. Myth or fact, the US military once ran a classified program to train soldiers as psychic spies. What do you
Is
think, Joe?
Oh man, that sounds crazy. Is this like the
Do you know
men who
this?
stare
Do
at
you know this?
goats thing?
Yes.
Is it? I
Yes.
Even watching that movie and knowing that it was technically supposed to be based off of true facts, I still don't believe that that's true. I mean, logically, I guess it's possible, but if you were to ask me if I really believe that, I would say no, probably.
The power of the mind, the power of what it means to be human and consciousness is just beginning to be understood. And for a long time, the military's been trying to figure it out as well. Here's just if so, this is 100% fact. Here's just a few of the programs that the government has funded. Project Stargate, a real CIA, DIA program, ran from 1978 to 1995. Trained Army personnel in remote viewing. So that's the ability to meditate so hard that you're consciously being able to start receive information, oftentimes visualization and pictures of places, locations, and in
Weren't
some
they doing that
cases,
at the start of the Ghostbusters movie?
they've done it in a lot of movies. So it's psychic intelligence gathering, and there's been some folks that have come on in this specialty and expertise on the Sean Ryan show. So it's not as like direct as you think. Like, oh, I just go in here, I meditate, and I can read the future. It's much more vague than that, and it's like an intelligence gathering. And how can you synthesize this, and what's credible, what's not? Who's coming back with you know the ability to actually do it versus the things that they're saying are just not making up. So it's really, really interesting. Cost roughly $20 million over its lifetime, declassified in 1995, and as you said, Joe, became the basis for the movie with George Clooney, The Men Who Stare at Goats. So the basis for it, right? So not everything in a Hollywood movie is
Yeah.
gospel. A separate army program called the Jedi Project in the early 80s, very heavily influenced from Star Wars, right? Explored meditation, visualization, and neuro-linguistic programming for elite soldiers, partially documented in John Ronson's book in the same film. So the Pentagon's been doing some pretty weird things with mindfulness for 40 years. 40 years ago, than anything that John, our guest today, has been talking about. So it can be like anything else. It can be used for good. It can be used for warfare. The mind is that fifth generation warfare, being able
Yeah.
to influence and attack without you even realizing it. And so part of mindfulness is being able to have your own like physical and mental guards up to some of those things as well. So really
I will
interesting.
say, without really like digging into it, the little mother's intuition and things like that. We always joked around that my mom had ESPN, ESP. It was the joke, but I mean, she would just know things sometimes. I'd get away with something, I would think, and she'd be like, where were you today at 2 o'clock? In retrospect, she was a hairdresser and knew everybody in the town, but back then it scared me. back,
Hey,
back then it
I don't
scared
have the
me.
study.
So
I don't have the study, but they have scientifically proved this mother's
I believe
intuition is
that.
like
I really
it's
do
a real
believe
thing.
that.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's something you could really train. I feel like it's, whether you believe in the Bible or whatever, I think it's either a gift or a curse or it's not. I don't know if you could really I don't know. We'll find out more. But as for now, Alphas, we appreciate you. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Apple products, MySpace, Vine, wherever you love to listen. Subscribe to our newsletter, send us mail and guest recommendations at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima, and we will see you next time.
See you next time. Thanks everybody.
Had to get the last one.